Hello, everyone. So this month we have my friend Bobak Ferdowsi. He works for NASA and JPL. He's done Mars landings and manages teams. He's been a gremlin. You may also know him from Sharknado, which is obviously one of the heights of his accomplishment. Will you explain to people what your job is?
I wish I understood my job better, but let's see. I am the flight system lead for NISAR, which is a satellite that we're collaborating with the Indian Space Research Organization, Earth observing satellite meant to kind of look at large landmass changes, climate change, design of the system, what it is, and and how it should operate. There's the test bed, which is the hardware that we build here on the ground to basically be our proxy for the unit that we're going to send into space. And then the part that I grew up on before this, the fault protection, which is basically how can the spacecraft misbehave, and then how should it behave in response to misbehavior?
What is the life cycle of a project like this?
There are 5 main phases to a project, but phase A is sort of the very early development. You're trying very hard, I would say, in phase A, which is something I personally struggle with, to keep every option open. A mission concept review, that's where you come up with basically the fundamental of what your mission is going to be, and you're going to sort of describe to the people who are going to fund you. And B is where you start really putting kind of flesh on the bones, design out a concept, right, that now has parts that can be broken out into other things. And you graduate from that with a preliminary design review. And again, at that point, it looks hopefully, very close to the final form. Phase C, when you enter that, right, like this box will fit within this envelope, this box fits here. You kind of graduate and you go to this phase D, where you're doing the integration of that system. Have a review called SIR, System Integration Review, where we say we're ready to make the spacecraft be a spacecraft now. The end of that phase is the launch readiness review.
When you're using the word box, is that just a placeholder that you're using for this conversation, or is that actually the language that you would use?
No, it's a box. Yeah, they're almost always boxes. So
okay.
They have all the cabling on the outside, right? So if I'm expecting a D sub, like your old school kind of connector, right? They'll have a bunch of those on the outside.
I'm not sure how I got this far in these novels without knowing these phases.
Curiosity, which was my first project, I started in phase A and I made it to phase E. That's not typical.
Is there a sound that you associate?
My favorite parts are associated with being in test venues. Constant, unescapable sound of airflow. It's almost impossible to keep a clean room clean without airflow.
And that's because it keeps dust from settling? Or?
That's right. Yeah, largely it's from particles from settling on the surface, right? Because what you're trying to kepe clean is not necessarily the air itself, but the surfaces.
What's the most painful part of your job?
Those rooms get pretty painful. I remember a lot of nights where as I would shut it down and slowly turn off the racks, I would start feeling that slow sense of why did I feel so stressed this whole time? You don't realize how loud everything is constantly.
In terms of things that help me make people feel alive when I'm writing them as characters, things that are annoying.
I think about now, where I am in my experience, and 90% of the time it's faster for me to do a job than somebody who works for me because I've done it before. But I have to recognize the bigger picture, right? Part of the job that I'm doing here is training another generation to be able to do my job and to do all these different things.
All right, let's go to some questions from these lovely folks. The projects you work on are years in the making. How do you personally keep your momentum and motivation?
Working on missions where I appreciate why we're doing it is the biggest thing. It would be really, honestly, if it would be really hard for me, I think, to say I would spend this long, building a fighter jet. And I definitely rely on this being hey, this is a project that will benefit humanity.
Rachel wants to know what's a skill you came into your job with that you thought would never be useful, and it was.
Technical writing skills and ethics both have turned out to play a much larger role. The communication aspect of the job, particularly for systems engineering, which is what I do, is much larger than I ever anticipated.
You said used squishy risk earlier.
Oh, yeah. I use it to describe the risks that are very hard to quantify.
Leanne wants to know what your thoughts are on the public treating things like Curiosity almost like a live and sentient entity.
I think every robot carries with it 100% the personality of the people that built it. I feel very much like Curiosity was like raising a child with 1,000 people. And I mean, if you couldn't tell from Curiosity's wheels with the JPL logo, in Morse code on them, or the Perseverance parachute, right, with the Dare Mighty things, encoded into it, or the family portrait on the top deck of Perseverance. I have mixed feelings about gendering robots, but I don't have any mixed feelings about assigning them personalities because I think they really do reflect humans. It's lost often that these things are incredibly hand-built, right? They are literally people's hands. It's not a robot factory. It's somebody with a wrench who is tightening a bolt. They're very bespoke, custom things that we build. And I love that they have personalities.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. There are 2 scenes that you have given me clarity on.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate it.
All right. I don't know how many more characters you can name after me, but that's fine. One's enough. I'm good. I'm good with being an ambassador.
Yeah, maybe the ambassador has, there's like naming rights on a crater or something.
That's the dream. If you guys haven't looked up naming conventions, it's a very fascinating subject of like craters of a certain size on Mars are named after cities that have less than 100,000 population on Earth. And then larger craters are named after astronomers. And there's like distinctions between, anyway, very fun stuff to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to turn the recording off now and appreciate you so much.